Okay. Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this evening's session. And I'm just going to mute everybody just for the time being. Okay. So we'll begin with the numbers. So please join me in Gasho. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu. Thank you again for joining us. We're plodding along. We're doing the Shoshinge, the hymn on the Shinjin and Nembutsu, written by Shinran Shonin in his canon of his work, The True Teaching, Practice, and Attainment of the Pure Land Way. And we've come actually quite a bit. We finished the section on the teaching part, and we're in the second half now on the 7 patriarchs. And we're actually at the second of the 7 patriarchs, Vasubandhu, or Tenjin Bosatsu, or also known as Sesshin Bosatsu in Japanese. Why he's got, well, they all have numerous names, and don't ask me why. I don't know why they just do. But Tenjin is known as, or Vasubandhu is known as a great Buddhist monk who started off by studying what we call the Abhidharma school. And this was a systematic view of the mind and body, and it broke down all existence into different elements. But from there, he moved on to what's known as the Yogacara school of Buddhism. And his works are very, very, very complicated. And in fact, his work with the Pure Land school wasn't really understood until the next of the 7 patriarchs, Tanwan or Donnan. Tanwan or Donnan made a commentary on Vasubandhu's work, and that's where we really begin to understand it. So this Vasubandhu or Tenjin Bosatsu has his major contribution to the Pure Land school is a treatise entitled, in Japanese, we say Muryo Jukyo Ubadaisha Ganshoge, or Discourse on the Amitaya Sutra and Gatha of Aspiration for Birth. Even just the sounds of it, you can see it sounds like a very difficult piece. And it's also known for its short name of Jodoron, or the Discourse on the Pure Land. Okay. And it's composed of 2 parts. And the first part is a verse, a song. And it's praising the various parts of, it's praising the Pure Land, Amida Buddha, and the Bodhisattvas in the Pure Land. And then the second half of it is actually talking about how a Bodhisattva attains enlightenment. So the first section is a song, so it's a verse, and then the second section is like a prose written, basically an argument of how Bodhisattvas attain enlightenment. And he talks about the 5 gates of Nembutsu practice. Okay. And these become very popular after Vasubandhu, but he breaks it down as Daihai or worship, Sandan or praise, aspiration, Sagang, and kansatsu, visualization, and then finally eko, merit transference. Now, along with these 5 gate practices, Nembutsu practices, there's associated with it what they call the 5 virtues. So as you perfect each of these practice, you gain one of these virtues. And these virtues, it seems kind of strange when you look at it just by itself. Approach, joining the great assembly, entering the house, entering the inner room, returning outside to play in the garden and forest. But what it is, it's a parable, actually. It's taking each of these 5 gate practices leads up to a virtue. So when you begin to worship, you're getting closer towards the truth. And then as you begin praising the teachings, and when they say praising the teaching shares, this is talking literally about chanting, okay? And when you start chanting, then you're joining amongst all the others. So, and that's what they're talking about in the parable is it's like approaching a house with a treasure in it. And so the first one is you start going towards the house, and it's said that there's a group of individuals that are clamoring outside the house. And so you join them as you start chanting or praise. And then once you have the aspiration, in this case, to be born in the Pure Land, then you're actually going inside the house. And then once you're inside the house, through visualization, you enter into the inner quarters where the treasure is located. And once you see that truth, then you can go back outside and you can share that truth with others. So that's that returning outside to play in the garden and forest. Okay, so if you can sort of visualize yourself that these 5 things are talking about in this parable of a person that is going towards this house with a treasure and then entering it and getting into the inner sanctuary to see the actual treasure. And then once you've seen it or know it, then you can go outside to share it with others. Okay, and so those are the 5 practices that bring about these 5 virtues. And the bodhisattvas, again, who perfect these 5 gates and realize the 5 virtues in the Pure Land, they realize wisdom, compassion, and skillful means, which comprise the true mind of what we call prajna, or true wisdom. So at the very beginning of the hymn, the verse part, the song part, Vasubandhu actually expresses his profession of faith. And it's with this line that he says, let me just pull that up. O world honored one, with singleness of mind, I take refuge in Tathagata of unhindered light, shining throughout the 10 quarters, and aspire to be born in the land of peace and bliss. So,
excuse me.
Oh, does somebody have a question? No. So basically, this is Vasubandhu, who was a Yogacara master. Yogacara is the thought-only school, and so basically, Yogacara, what their school says is that we have our 6 or 5 senses and consciousness. That's the 6 sensory activities, and then below that you have your subconscious, and then below that you have what we call the alaya consciousness. And so Yogacara was originally much more. It's very different from Pure Land Buddhism, if you will. Okay? And what Yogacara is stating is that all of our experiences go down into this what we call alaya storehouse, and it's this alaya storehouse. What it is it creates potentiality um, in the future for things to arise. And so when we talk about karma and when we talk about reincarnation and all these things, according to Yogacara, it's in this storehouse area that all experiences from this life get carried over into the future. And then new potentiality comes for something to arise. However, when our when we're our consciousness is when it's laced with what we call samsara or afflictions, then what arises is more suffering. So that story that I told you last week about the cat who lived, what was it, 10,000 lives? No, yeah, 10,000 lives, right? There's until the cat really encounters in that story, that cat keeps on coming back because it's still within the world of samsara, and it finally doesn't come back at the end because it's gone beyond that existence. And similarly, so according to the Yogacara school, it was said that if you know all the plus and minuses that go into this alaya storehouse, if there's defilements attached to the thoughts, then things will come out negative in the future. So basically, that's saying you go back in circles in the existence of suffering. However, so that was his Yogacara understanding, and Vasubandhu is actually known quite heavily for that school of Buddhism. But again, he also was instrumental in the Pure Land school as well. And you'll find this amongst the many different masters, is that they're not only one thing. They study various schools of Buddhism as well. But so with the Pure Land tradition, though, what Vasubandhu is saying is that there is a going and a coming. There's two aspects to things. It's not just we go to the Pure Land and we relax and enjoy it. Once we're there, once you know the truth, you have to share it with others. Okay, and that again, that goes back to the basic principles of Buddhism of wisdom and compassion, right? Once you know something, if you don't share it, there's no compassion associated with that. And so with Vasubandhu's thought, this idea of coming back to the forest to play, well, the word they use is play, but it's actually to share with those who are still ignorant of the truth. And the desire, when you desire to attain enlightenment, according to the Mahayana principles, the larger vehicle principles, is that once you attain enlightenment, or your desire is to share it with everybody else, so that all beings enter enlightenment together. So, excuse me for a second. So you're all familiar with when we chant at the very end, we say Gannishi Kuroku Byodo Se Isai Do Hotsubo Daishin Ojo Annak Koku. That's what we call the ekomon. Eko means to merit transference. Okay. Yes. Somebody say something. Oh, I thought I heard somebody. Okay. Um, so what we normally call the ekomon or ekoku is merit transference. So in those in that section on Vasubandhu there, the last gate where it says eko, merit transference, right? So when we read that ekoku, and we chant the ekoku on at the end of every chant, right? Whether it's a Sambutsuge, Jusege, or Junirai, whatever it is, at the end we chant the ekoku. And incidentally, there are more than one, but the one that we chant the most common one, is this ekoku. And actually, this is from not from Vasubandhu, but it's from Shantao. We'll get to him down the road. But when you read the English translation of that, the virtue of Amida's vow is shared equally by all. Together attaining awakened mind, we are born in the land of peace. Right? It's a desire for all beings that we share the virtue of Amida's vow. And together we attain the awakened mind and born in the land of peace together. And this is a very important aspect of Mahayana Buddhism, is this whole idea of interdependence, that we're not just in it for myself or just for my own enlightenment, but in fact, the desire is that all beings attain together. So you may have heard of the loving kindness meditation, right? So, and there are phrases such as, may all beings in the world share in this peace. May all beings in this world be relieved of their sufferings. This all comes from the same principle, right? And so when Vasubandhu is talking about coming and going, this is his input into the Pure Land teachings, is that it's not just about us going to get enlightened, but it's also just as important, us coming back to help those who are in suffering. Okay. So, and this is actually further clarified by Tanwan or Donnan. So if we look at the actual passages in the Shoshinge of Vasubandhu, right? It starts off with Bodhisattva Vasubandhu composing a treatise declares that he takes refuge in the Tathagata of unhindered light. So this was that first line of his verse or song, is that he's taking refuge in the Buddha of unhindered light. And that relying on the sutras, he will reveal the true and real virtues and make widely known the great vow by which we leap crosswise beyond birth and death. By Amida's directing of virtue through the power of the primal vow, he discloses the mind that is single, so that all beings be saved. So this mind that is single is a very important passage. It talks about having no doubt, and it also talks about mind that continues on. So when we hear the teachings of Amida Buddha, or when we awaken to the working of Amida Buddha, then we have no doubt and the mind continues on. This is according to what Vasubandhu is saying, okay? When a person turns and enters a great treasure ocean of virtue, necessarily he joins Amida's assembly. So this is talking about that going back to that parable about the individual approaching the house, right? So when a person receives or hears the teachings, they become one of the assembly. And then if you continue on, it says, and when he reaches the lotus held world. So this lotus held world is that um, inner sanctuary within the house. If you go back to that parable. Okay. So again, I've mentioned before that according to the Buddhist doctrines or teachings, the lotus is often used as an example of purity. Also, something that is very important about the lotus flower and why it's used is that unlike most flowers, and I can't remember the name of the type of flowers, but so most flowers you have the male and female parts, right? You need the bees to pollinize the stamen and what is it called? Help me out here. What's the two parts of? Is it pest? What?
言ったらいいじゃん。
アントラ。
アントラ。
アントラじゃない。アンセンかな。
Well, anyways, in most flowers, you need a male and female part, right? The bees have to pollinize it. Lotus is very unique. The moment that the flower blossoms, it has all the seeds for the next generation. So it doesn't need pollination like other plants, okay? So often when we talk about the lotus in Buddhism, it's partially showing that when the enlightenment happens, it already is there to give back to the future. Okay, and so it's a very unique flower in that sense, in that you don't need this process of male and female. When it blossoms, everything is already there. And so you know when you have the lotus roots, when you eat the lotus roots, the renkong, and it's got all the little chambers. So when the flower comes out, it actually has all these little chambers in the flower with the seeds for the next generation already in it.
こうやって
So that's makes it a very
穴が開いてて、ここに種が入って。
それを、
そのことを言ってます。
すみません。皆さん聞こえます。
Sorry.
I'm going to just okay, thank you. So basically, so the lotus is often used as the parable for enlightenment, and that's in this case again when we go back to the parable of the house, that's what's in the inner sanctuary or the inner room is enlightenment itself, and so once he reaches that lotus held world, he immediately realizes the body of suchness or dharma nature. That's what it says in this Shoshinge section. Then sporting in the forest of blind passion, he manifests transcendent powers. Entering the garden of birth and death, he assumes various forms to guide others. Okay, so this is talking about returning. Okay, the aspect of returning back to help all those in suffering. And entering the garden of birth and death, he assumes various forms to guide others. This is it's said that, of course, the Buddha comes back in many different forms to guide us to enlightenment. But if you don't take it literally, it could literally be all the causes and conditions, or it can be all the causes and conditions that helps us lead to awakening. I don't know if I mentioned, maybe I didn't mention in this class. One of the things that in Japan, they have this has to do with abortions or um, miscarriages of babies. And one of the things that they have in Japan that is very interesting, it's a way of for mothers to deal with things is uh, they call it musical kuyo. Musical kuyo, and if you look at other schools of Buddhism, what musical kuyo has said that these miscarried fetuses or aborted fetuses, they, according to the other schools, they'll say that they actually did something wrong, and so they actually have to go um, to by they call it Sanzu no Kawa. It's like the river Styx, if you will, and they're on the shore of this river Styx or Sanzu no Kawa, and they have to pile up rocks one on top of the other, and their punishment, if you will, and their whole idea is trying to pile those rocks high enough so that you can get out of a very negative place. So in this, I thought of the musical kuyo. Um, you, they say, you have these chants to help the fetuses on the way or out of their suffering. And there's a bodhisattva by oh, my mind is going blank right now for a second. Jizo Bosatsu, Bodhisattva Jizo, Kishagarbra, I think is but Jizo is supposed to help these fetuses, and it said that so these fetuses, as they're stacking their rocks, every once in a while these I guess demons, oni would be, yeah, ogre type things would come up and they would knock their pile of rocks over, so they have to start over again from zero. So Jizo apparently goes down and he hides some of these fetuses or infants in his sleeves and takes them off to the Pure Land. And so in some of the other schools, when you're doing this, what they call musical kuyo, you're chanting to wish that infant on to a better existence. However, in Pure Land school, so as I was mentioning here, what Vasubandhu says about, once you've entered the inner sanctum, you come back out to help those in suffering. We actually look at those infants become our teachers. So we don't say they've done something wrong, if you will. Okay, they are actually our teachers in that they've gone before us through the working of Amita's Primal Vow. There are seniors, if you will, in that sense, and they're teaching us. They become teachers to us because they lead us again to listen to the Dharma. So again, this whole idea of going and coming and going, even something like the stillbirth or aborted fetus become not something that we I mean, we definitely mourn the loss, but it's not we take the negativity is taken away. They haven't done anything bad per se, according to the way we look at it. They in fact become are teachers. In fact, the way that other schools look at it too, it's actually a way for the mothers who are going through the very difficult time to deal with the situation. So in many of the temples in Japan, they actually have these little statues of Jizo Bosatsu, and the mothers will go and put little um, bibs on them, and often they'll write very, very sad stories about, you know, apologizing to that infant. So I don't want to say what they're doing is wrong or bad or anything like that. I'm just saying from the Pure Land perspective, this aspect of coming, going and coming again, is sometimes used to explain, even in the most difficult times, that they can become our bodhisattvas in that sense. Okay. So what I also wanted to do was going forward. So I didn't mention this last week, but Shinan Shonin, the founder of Shoshinge, okay, for a large part of his life, led a lifestyle as a monk, and as and his writings were directed towards other monks. So what we're studying right now, Shoshinge, comes out of that larger the canon of his work, what we call the Kyogyo Shinsho, or the true teaching, practice, and attainment of the Pure Land Way. And it's within that chapter of practice, and it connects the chapter of practice and the chapter of Shinjin, is sort of a connector of the two. But all of this is written in classical Chinese, okay, the Kyogyo Shinsho. And the reason why it was written in classical Chinese was because it was meant for other learned individuals, namely other monks. And when we look at the Kyogyo Shinsho, when it was written, so what happened was Shinran Shonin's teacher, Honen Shonin, when Honen Shonin was alive, he was very discreet as to who would be able to see his own writings. Okay, mainly because Honen was leery of criticism of the Nembutsu teaching, or the Nembutsu school. Pure Land school was a new school of Buddhism, so he was worried that, of course, there's going to be a lot of criticism towards it. And one of the main reasons is that in the Nembutsu teachings, it empowered the individuals, right? Honen Shonin was teaching to local merchants. He was teaching to women. He was talking to whoever wanted to come and listen, basically. He was teaching the Pure Land teachings. And this went actually against what the traditional schools were doing, because in order to become a true disciple of the Buddha, it was thought that one had to enter the Sangha. So you had to go into a monastery and lead a very reclusive lifestyle. But Honen was saying, no, this actually teaching is for everybody. So he was teaching to the lay people, right? And again, prior to Honen, the connection between the lay people and the monastics was that the lay people gave tithing, the alms, to the monastics. And in return, they would get the benefit of listening to the monks' teachings, as well as in a future life, they will have the right conditions to be born into a life where they can actually become a monastic themselves. Okay, so that was how it was viewed in Japan prior to Honen Shonin. So the lay people really didn't have much to do with studying literature. Well, most of them couldn't read, for that matter, right? So they couldn't actually study, even if they wanted to. But when Honen came along, he shared the teachings with everybody, and it basically empowered the local, the common person, which was actually a threat on the hierarchy of the monastics. Okay, and so Honen, because of that, he was very careful while he was alive as to who could actually read his writings, right? And we know Shinran Shonin was given permission to copy Honen's work, also to make a portrait of Honen, which is, these things were not something that you did, that one did to anybody. However, and I don't know the exact reason, but once Honen passes away, for whatever reason, his work actually becomes widely publicized, and there is a Kegon monk by the name of Myoe, who gets hold of Honen's writings, and he strongly criticizes Honen's work. He writes a book called Zaijarin. Did I not write that somewhere? I thought I did. Sorry. Did I? Did I not write all this down somewhere? Maybe I didn't. I could have sworn I did. Anyways, so this monk by the name of Myoe criticizes Honen's writing, saying it's heretical. And so he writes this piece called Zaijarin, and says that this Pure Land teaching is not Buddhism. It goes against the tenets of Buddhism. So Shinran Shonin writes his canon of his work, the Kyogyo Shinsho, to refute this Myoe's criticism, and to validate actually the Pure Land school. So this is also a very important aspect of Buddhism, is that in order to make your school valid, you have to show lineage and history and why it is valid. So this is what Shinran did with this Kyogyo Shinsho. So he started writing this Kyogyo Shinsho when Shinran was about 53. He was living at that time in the Kanto area, eastern part of Japan. And he starts writing the Kyogyo Shinsho, and it takes him about 20 years to complete it. There are earlier drafts, but he keeps on revisiting it. If you look at some of the early manuscripts of Shinran's writing, it's quite amazing, because after he writes in it, he'll put footnotes footnotes all along the sides. And so it looks like a real mess, actually. Partially because paper at that time was very precious. You didn't just write something and throw it out, right? So he kept it, and he would rewrite it, and he would add to it, and he did this for about 20 years. Completing it after he returned to Kyoto from the Kanto area. So it said that he completed the final edition around the time he was about 75. And then at that point, he actually takes a drastic turn in the way he begins to do things. So up until that point, Shinran was very much writing for other monks and scholars. But when he turns around 76, his focus now has changed quite a bit. So what had happened is when he went, especially when he went out to the Kanto area out east, it was sort of a, oh, in our days, we would call it like a frontier, if you will, right? And so he was at that point when Shinran was out east, his audience were very common people, farmers, um, people like that, not the nobility or the monks, the head schools of Buddhism. That was all in the Kansai area, like Kyoto, Nara. Those are all in the western part of or central part of Japan, where Kyoto is, right? So he was very far away from that culture when he was out east. So because he was talking to more common people, he had to change the way he presented the Dharma. So if he wrote in classical Chinese, very few could actually read it. The it's very amazing when I went to school in Japan. Part of what I had to learn was, and I, by no means would I say I mastered it, but we have to learn how to read classical Chinese. And the thing about classical Chinese is that the whole structure of writing, the order of words is different than in Japanese. So how they write it, classical Chinese in Japanese, is that they'll actually have little keys or notations to read it in the Japanese format. Yeah, it's kind of hard to just to explain. You actually go in Chinese. You might write something and read it vertically, directly, but in Japanese you have to sort of jump around because the way the punctuation and everything in Japan works different. So you have to sort of reorder it. So when they write classical Chinese, but want to read it in Japanese style, they have to actually denote, you go from this character, you read this character first before you read this character, and it has all these little notations. But anyways, the local person definitely would not have been able to read that. So what Shinran did when he was 76, he starts writing these classical Japanese poems known as wasan. A wasan was a type of poem that was introduced in the Heian period, which is around 8th or 9th century. And the wasan were poems often used by Buddhist monks, and it's sort of like a haiku, okay, but to praise the teachings. And so Shinran, in order for people to be able to read the canon of his work, the true teaching, practice, and attainment of Pure Land Way, he writes these poems as sort of almost like a way to explain that canon of his work. And he's actually a very prolific writer, as you can see on what I've written here. We call it the Sanjo Wasan, or the three major collections of wasans or hymns. And they're broken down into three pieces. Jodo Wasan, which is the hymns on the Pure Land. So he actually takes parts of the sutras on the Pure Land, and there's 118 hymns of those. And then the next section, which is more pertinent to what we're doing right now, is what we call the Koso Wasan, or the hymns on the Pure Land Masters. And there's a total of 119 of them altogether. And there are, if you break it down, there's 10 hymns on Bodhisattva Nagarjuna, and there's 10 hymns on Bodhisattva Vasubandhu. There's 34 hymns on Tanwan, and 7 hymns on Tao Cho, 26 hymns on Shantao, and 10 hymns on Genshin, and 20 hymns on Genku or Honen Shoni. And then the third of the collections is what we call the hymns on the right semblance and last Dharma age. And there's 114 of those. So you can see the vast numbers that he actually wrote of these hymns. And when we talk about hymns, so I've added here at the back these hymns on the Nagarjuna and Vasubandhu. Incidentally, if you Google, if any of you are interested, you can just Google up on Google. If you Google collected works of Shinran, that whole collected works of Shinran is actually on there, and you can read the whole thing online if any of you are interested. It was actually uploaded by a temple in Alaska, a Shin Buddhist temple in Alaska. They actually uploaded it before they had permission from the Honganji, and so they were chastised at first, but Honganji realized what great work or what they have done has helped out so many people that it's now officially recognized. So if you Google collected works of Shinran, you can see all Shinran's writings online. And this is right from there. And it saves me from retyping everything as well. So what this is, if you compare this with the Shoshinge, like the 10 hymns on Nagarjuna, it's a little bit more fleshed out than what he has in the Shoshinge. So it's explaining exactly what's in the Shoshinge on Nagarjuna. Our teacher, Bodhisattva Nagarjuna, abundantly praises the Pure Land in the West in such works as his commentaries on the Mahaprajnaparamita Sutra and the 10 Bodhisattva stages, and urges us to practice the Nembutsu. Okay, so in the Shoshinge, Shinran doesn't mention the title of the things that Nagarjuna had written, but here he's gone into more detail. And then underneath that, there's a bracket. This is actually not Shinran's writing there, but it's commentaries that I think the Honganji added in the collected works of Shinran. So Nagarjuna or Ryuju literally means Naga or dragon tree. Okay, so it was, the legend says that Nagarjuna was born under a tree and taken and raised by a Naga king, a dragon king. And he became the son of this king in southern India, hence his name Nagarjuna. Okay. This second hymn says, the world honored one foretold that a monk named Bodhisattva Nagarjuna would appear in southern India and would crush the wrong views of being and non-being. Okay. So, and again, there's a little explanation. South India, further south, there was a great spirit king who was the master of Mount Lanka. Mount Lanka was a mountain in the south of India which rose from the sea. And because this king loved the Mahayana teaching, Shakyamuni Tathagata crossed the sea to his kingdom and taught the Dharma to him. On that occasion, Shakyamuni foretold us sometime after his entrance into Nirvana, Nagarjuna would appear in the world and vanquish the non-Buddhist teachings. And again, this carries on. So because I'm running out of time, you could read this on your own, but it's a much more detailed explanation of each of the bodhisattvas. And if we go into the 10 hymns on the Bodhisattva Vasubandhu on the following page, again, it starts off with Bodhisattva Vasubandhu compassionately urges us who are possessed of blind passions to take refuge in Amida's universal vow. And he goes on to talk about the adornments of the Pure Land of Peace are perceived only through the wisdom shared by Buddhas. The land is infinite, like space, vast and without bounds. So it was said that only the Buddhas could truly see the Pure Land as it is. And so as Vasubandhu describes the various elements, he also is stated that truly it's only the Buddhas that can truly see all aspects of the Pure Land. This next one here is also quite common. It's a very famous one, the third one of Vasubandhu. Of those who encounter the power of the primal vow, not one passes by in vain. They are filled with the treasure ocean of virtues, the defiled waters of their blind passions, not separated from it. It's a very popular one in Japan in particular, but as we receive the truth of the primal vow, it says that not one passes in vain, and that the treasures of the ocean of virtue fill us, but our defiled waters of blind passions, it's not like they're separated from it. It fills us even as we are, just as we are, with our so just like the river that goes into the ocean becomes one with the ocean, it doesn't mean that the water from the river disappears, but it becomes one with the ocean. There are parables, or I've been taught through my teachers, that when a person passes away and you ask the person, or you ask where that person has gone to, often it's the explanation is they've returned to what we call the river of life or the ocean of life. And if you ask them, if you're looking at it from the shore, you might look at part of that river and say, oh, there's part of that person over there, a part of that person over there, over here. But in the river itself, that person has become, the entity has become the river itself. So it's not that it's disappeared, but it's become completely become one with it. So this is what they're talking about here, is that it's not that our defiled being suddenly disappears and we become pure, but even with all those defilements, we're accepted, or we become one with all beings, or the Dharma through the vow. So actually, I'm running out of time. The sages of the Tathagata's pure lotus are born, transformed from the flower of perfect enlightenment. Thus, the aspirations of sentient beings are swiftly and completely fulfilled there. So, as I mentioned before about the lotus flower, at the moment it blossoms, it's got everything for the next generation. In the same sense, that's what they're talking about here. And again, this is that idea of going into that house and seeing the truth in the inner sanctuary. It's like the lotus, being in the pure lotus, transformed with perfect enlightenment. The immovable sages who were formerly humans and devas are born from the ocean of wisdom, the universal vow. The virtues of their mental activity are pure and free of discrimination, like empty space. So again, once they become enlightened, they now start working towards us. Vasubandhu, author of the treatise, took refuge in the unhindered light with a mind that is single. He teaches that by entrusting ourselves to the vow's power, we will reach the fulfilled land. To take refuge with a mind that is single in the Buddha's unhindered light, filling the 10 quarters, is, in the words of Vasubandhu, author of the treatise, the mind that aspires to attain Buddhahood. The mind that aspires to attain Buddhahood is a mind to save all sentient beings. The mind to save all sentient beings is true and real Shinjin, which is Amidas benefiting of others. Shinjin is a mind that is single. The mind that is single is a diamond-like mind. The diamond-like mind is the mind aspiring for enlightenment. The mind is itself other power. On reaching the land of the vow, we immediately realize the supreme nirvana, and thereupon we awaken great compassion. All this is called Amida's directing of virtue. So again, he's talking about Vasubandhu's treatise, what he says in there, and again, the mind that is single is the aspiration to attain enlightenment, and Shinran equates this to what we call Shinjin, and which is given to us through the working of Amida Buddha. So the mind to aspire to save all beings is that single mind as well, aspiring for enlightenment, Buddhahood, but again, at the same time, realizing that becomes compassion and working back. And that's what we call the directing of virtues, or Eko from Amida Buddha. So in one of the other verses, Shinran talks about how in the Pure Land, it's actually empty. And the reason why it's empty is that people don't, it's not like going to Hawaii or going to some paradise where you just sit and laze around. The moment you attain enlightenment, you become work again. Okay. So sorry to disappoint you if you wanted to something easy and relaxing. If you wanted that, yeah, you'll have to find that somewhere else. Okay. So we come to 8:30 now. I'm going to be introducing again more of these Wasan poems as we go along as well. But you can take a look at it and read it yourself and see how it correlates with the section of the Shoshinge that we're covering. Okay, so we've now covered Nagarjuna and Vasubandhu, and the next person, Donnan or Tanluan, he actually is the one that he's very, very important in Shin Buddhism, because he sort of brought the two ideas of Nagarjuna and Vasubandhu, and he sort of melded them together. Okay, and I'll explain about that next time then. So are there any questions or comments, or are you completely confused, or any questions, comments, or have you all heard about Vasubandhu before, or Nagarjuna, or
I have a question.
yes?
Number, are those two people, are they important in, let's say, other Mahayana
Yes.
schools?
Yes.
And
So Nagarjuna is considered the father of 8 different schools of Buddhism. Interestingly enough, Honen Shonin did not include him as one of the great masters, but Shinran did. But yeah, so Nagarjuna is also, they call him the father of Mahayana Buddhism. And Vasubandhu, as I mentioned, he's very well known for his Yogacara teachings in school. So and that happens with different all the different schools. So even like Tibetan Buddhism, for instance, Nagarjuna is considered very important in their teaching as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments or?
Hey, Sensei, it's Michael.
Hi, Michael.
Hi. I was just making an observation that masters that seem to be really important to Shinran get a lot of poems, a lot of hymns, 34 for Tanlong and 26 for Shandao. It just seemed interesting.
Yeah, he had so his name Shin Nang. Shin comes from the Tenjin, the Vasubandhu, the second character of Tenjin, and Shin, it could be read as Shin, and then Ran comes from Donnan, Tanwan. So Shinran took parts of their names and incorporated it to his. So that's how we get Shinran. Okay.
Right.
And yes, definitely. And Shinran actually has written that he really is just following the teachings of the great masters. So according to Shinran, he has not created anything new, although it would be argued highly that Shinran actually did change things considerably. He looked into, as a simple example of that, is that when Nagarjuna talks about entering the realm of non-retrogression or stage of non-retrogression, normally, or most Pure Land masters prior to Shinran viewed that as entering the Pure Land. So you go into the Pure Land and then you fulfill practices to attain enlightenment. Okay? Where Shinran brought that down to this world and said, the moment that we receive Shinjin, the entrusting heart, is that stage of non-retrogression. So he's actually changed it completely, because when the other masters talk about entering the Pure Land, that's the next life, right? So they said that you gain that stage of non-retrogression in the next life, then you follow the practices, and then you attain enlightenment. So enlightenment is something in the distant future. Whereas for Shinran, he said that the moment where we attain or receive Shinjin is a stage of non-retrogression. And in fact, he further states that it's equivalent to being the Bodhisattva, Maitreya Bodhisattva, which is the next Buddha. So assured of enlightenment at the end of this life. Okay, so Shinran's really moved things up a bit, quite a bit.
That's it.
Oh, you're welcome. Any other questions or comments? Tomoko-san, do you have any questions or comments? You're muted right now. You have to unmute. Oh,
Yeah, these are those stages, that 52 stages and
yes.
non-progressive. So, how Shinran changed it? I don't know. It sounds like anybody can change the stage. And you
Hmm.
can say
Yeah,
you are.
so
Yeah.
the way we understand it, and this is from a Jodo Shinshu perspective, okay, is that Shinran read the true intentions of the masters and of the Buddha. So in Japanese, there's that terminology unryu kana unryu with the cloud and the dragon, and how the dragon is hidden behind the clouds, and so the point is to see that dragon that's hidden behind the clouds, to go beyond the surface, the clouds, and that's how we understand is that Shinran had a very deep understanding of the Dharma. And again, according to Shinran, he would say that he followed what the seven patriarchs, what Shakyamuni and then the seven patriarchs, what they were trying to teach. And he bases this on a lot of it on Honen Shonin, because he was a direct disciple of Honen. And Honen also goes out of his way to explain why these teachings are the right teachings. And so Shinran follows Honen's footsteps, and basically says these are the seven patriarchs that he talks about, and they are the ones that have passed down the true meaning of what the historical Buddha wanted to teach, which is the teachings of Amida Buddha. So if there's no other comments, and I will see you next week, and we'll go to Tanwan. So we have Tanwan or Donnan, then Tao Cho or Doshaku, then Shantao or Zendo, and then we have Genshin and Honen. So we have 5 more masters to study about, learn about, and then we'll take a break. But I might have to take a break, not next week, but the following week, because we have the national AGM coming up after that. So 2 weeks from now, we won't have a class. We'll have one more next week, and then 2 weeks, we'll take a break. Okay. So thank you all for
Thank
joining.
you. Thank
Thank you
you.
very much.